symptoms of a disorder become equated with having the full-blown version of the disorder. So this is an example. Reading agony aunt columns is a bit of a guilty pleasure of mine, and this is one about someone saying his girlfriend had an affair and he's struggling to cope with it. This is the response from the agony aunt. I'm just going to read out the key bit, which at the end they say, she says, what some people may not realize is that many betrayed partners experience symptoms of PTSD. Now, I'm not dismissing the possibility that this experience is really distressing, but I'm urging caution around this language, because thinking a lot about an event is a symptom of PTSD. Doesn't mean you have PTSD. To have PTSD, firstly, you have to have an event that counts as a trauma. Arguably, this doesn't. But you then need to have flashbacks, nightmares, difficulty sleeping, big impact on your mood, intense physiological reaction in your body. It has to be going on a lot for at least a month. When you have PTSD, your mind and your body becomes locked in that moment of terror when the event happened. And yet here we are saying, you know, if you start thinking a lot about an event, that's almost equivalent to having this disorder. So this article went viral a few months ago in the New York Times, talking about mental health in the pandemic. There's a name for that blah you're feeling. It's called languishing. And lots of people are like, oh, okay, the thing I'm experiencing is languishing. And I think this is a really understandable phenomenon for everyone, the idea that when you're struggling with something, you read up on it, you discover someone else has experienced it, and there's a name for it. Like, that's a really comforting process. So it's totally understandable why people do this. You know, there's an enormous drive to have language to describe our experiences, especially our distress. So I'm not really being critical of people using these terms, but I argue that it's a problem, and this is the kind of my main argument that I'm making here, why this is an issue. Firstly, these labels aren't always helpful for people. So yes, they're comforting, they help you understand yourself, but they're also a pretty heavy burden to take on. So if you experience something like your partner cheating on you, and you then think, oh my God, I've got PTSD, you know, I've got a mental illness, there's something wrong with my brain, there's still a lot of stigma, maybe this means I'm not going to get better, you know, these are heavy things to take on. And then, and this is really what kind of made me want to write the whole book, is that I think these terms are losing value for the people who really need them, for the people who really do have depression. And I've noticed this so much with students. If they're all saying they're depressed, how do you hear the ones that really are? But I think the more we talk about mental health problems, the more we create the sense that we're in a crisis, that this is the most unhappy generation of young people ever. I mean, they're saying it now with COVID, but they were saying it before. Actually, if you go and look at the data, it's not that clear cut at all. And yet I think the more it becomes sort of self-fulfilling, like the more we talk about mental health problems, the more we believe that we really are sort of uniquely unhappy as a generation, particularly young people. What's the solution? I think we need better quality information. I think it's great that we've started talking about mental health. I don't think we should stop, but I think we need to move the conversation forwards now. One way of doing that is to give a voice to the people who are seriously unwell. If you read a description of someone who has bipolar disorder or PTSD, you're much more cautious about using that term flippantly or using it to describe kind of transient experiences. I think we also need to promote this idea of a spectrum. It's okay if you're confused about this topic because it's totally confusing. You know, if you are struggling in lockdown, or if you're going through a breakup and you don't know if you're depressed or not, it's okay that you don't know, because actually there is this massive grey area, and even all the professionals can't agree about where the boundaries are drawn. So even though it's messy, like in interviews, people are like, oh, can you give me like a bullet point list about what is and isn't depression? No, I can't, and that would be very neat. But I think actually the sooner we kind of accept that this is a really complicated topic, the better. Lastly, I'd encourage everyone to go beyond the headlines, not the ones that are like, I've got PTSD and go and disbelieve people, but especially things like stats and kind of crises stories. Like, for example, one in The Guardian a few years ago, a quarter of 14-year-old girls have depression. If you go and read the art, or definitely if you go and read the scientific article, but even reading the Guardian article, it's just not what they found. It's not as bad as that. It's almost never as bad as the headline. want to end on this quote, which this is a writer, Stephen Pressfield. He this was talking about the internet actually, but I think it's really true when it comes to the mental health conversation. So the disease of our times is that we live on the surface. We're like the Platte River, a mile wide and an inch deep. And I think this perfectly captures where we are at the moment with mental health. So it's good that we've started talking, but our knowledge is so shallow. And the next step now, I think, is to try and go deeper. Thank you. I'm very keen to hear your thoughts.
Thank you. Honestly, really fascinating. I really liked it because it's the first time almost we've had people challenging the mental health arena, which I think is great. So listen, we've learned from COVID questionnaires and for the Prime Minister, you have to have 2 parts of every single question. So I've got 2 questions.
Okay.
The first one, which you touched on, but just to, do you not think we're too late and the genie is out of the bottle? And to get it back in and actually start calibrating it, as you say, it can't happen because we now live in a society where everything's black and white and you have to be polarized on the whole thing. And the second part, I suppose, more from a speaking perspective, from my kind of, if you're standing in front of a corporate audience and you're talking to the business more than actually you're talking to the individuals, what can a business take away from this when they've got to treat all their employees the same and make them feel loved and warm and stuff like that? And you're almost saying to us, unless you've got an extreme, back off a bit, I suppose.
No, I think conversations are kind of shifting all the time and becoming more nuanced. I think this was a necessary starting point. You're right, there's a lot of work to do, especially because people are so attached to these words in terms of providing them meaning. Like I was talking to a child psychiatrist the other day, and she said she gets teenagers storming out the room if she says, actually, you don't have bipolar disorder. You know, it's difficult to take away those terms from people when they've provided some sort of legitimacy and meaning. So I think the way to move forward is to, and I haven't probably said it enough in this talk in 20 minutes, the whole spectrum is valid, distress is valid, but we just need to be cautious about what we call it. I'm hopeful that it's not too late for that message. Your second point in terms of businesses, I think again it comes down to language and not dismissing people who fall short of a disorder. I mean, this is important for 2 reasons. Firstly, all distress is horrible, you know, heartbreak, grief, they're horrible experiences, just because they don't meet the full anxiety, just because they don't meet the full criteria, but also because people can start the lower end of the spectrum and move up, especially young people. So we need to take that stuff seriously. So it's really more of and if I were to do this with businesses, it's really more of a language thing. So take it seriously, but don't make people feel like there's something wrong with them by turning the whole thing into a medical problem. And there's ways of doing, I've seen interesting stuff about material for teenagers, about talking about being down or feeling fed up, but not using the word depression. So I think a big message that I would communicate to businesses is about, take the variety of mental health problems seriously, but be careful about the language that you use, I guess.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks so much, guys. Thanks.
Thanks, Lucy.
Thanks, bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.